Hi, I'm Dave Epstein. Welcome to Growing Wisdom. Today we're talking about harvesting potatoes. I love to grow potatoes, and I've already been out in the garden doing a little bit of harvesting today. I've got a couple of different varieties. I basically used my potatoes from last year in order to plant them and grow the new ones for the following year. Now, you can do that for several years in a row. Potatoes are really susceptible to viruses, so you might want to start with a fresh stalk. After doing that for a couple of years, it tends to give you larger potatoes. But what I'm noticing is that the vines are beginning to dry. So as the potato vines dry back, it's usually several weeks after they've flowered, that's the time to harvest them. A couple of different things you can do with harvesting potatoes. What I like to do is start taking them as I need them once they get somewhat mature. So right after they stop flowering, I get a few potatoes. We call those the new potatoes. The skins are very thin. They're really great. I love grilling them, for example, or maybe even just boiling them with a little bit of dill and some salt and pepper. Once we get towards the end of the season, I'll take out more of them, but I'm still going to leave the potatoes that are underneath the vines that are living. So notice here, some of these vines are still very green. Those vines are still living. The potatoes are still growing a bit. Other vines are really brown. I'm going to pull those potatoes up where the vines have died back. Let's take a look. So this particular potato vine, it's definitely died off, right? You can see here. Now, some people use forks in order to pull the potatoes up. My garden's very small, and what I tend to do is sort of go near the vine and basically just feel around. So sometimes what happens is, and this happens with forks too, is I cut it. So I'm going to use these tonight anyway, so I don't necessarily care that it's cut. Here's some other potatoes. If you don't have a garden and you want potatoes, you can actually grow them in a bucket. So we did the same thing, planted the potatoes in the bucket and dig around a little bit, and you can see got some potatoes. So I threw in a couple of different varieties in here. So some nice red potatoes. And there's a little fingerling. So there's enough potatoes here for a meal out of the one little bucket, and there's some more in there. We'll wait a little while because that plant's still growing. So we've got a pretty good haul of these fingerling potatoes. They're purple fingerling potatoes. I let them dry out, and then I gently take a very soft towel and kind of brush the soil off a little bit. I then put them in a dark location at 65 degrees. You try to have high humidity, so some basements have a dehumidifier, but you can have very high humidity, but that's where I keep them, and generally I can get them to go most of the fall through the winter and even into early spring and still be enjoying them before they start sprouting. They definitely want to be in a dark location. In an ideal situation, store your potatoes almost close to freezing, 35, 36, 37 degrees. If you have a refrigerator, you can do that. Don't put apples in there because the apples give off a gas that can cause the potatoes to sprout. But if you don't have a refrigerator with enough room for potatoes without apples, I just keep mine in the basement, in a cool spot in the basement, and they'll go 3 or 4 months. Eventually they'll start to shrivel up and they'll even start to sprout a little bit. You can use those for next year. As I talked about at the beginning of the video, I might start with a brand new set of potatoes to start a new crop. And also, definitely do not plant your potatoes in the same area year after year because the diseases and the viruses will be in that area of your soil. So you really want to move them around. The same thing if you're planting in buckets. Just use the bucket for something else instead of the potatoes the following year. There's another video out there on how to plant potatoes, but this is really about how to harvest them, how to store them. There's also a wealth of information online, but really I want to encourage you to plant potatoes in your garden. It's a great crop. It's easy, wonderful, and who doesn't like potatoes? For Growing Wisdom, I'm Dave Epstein.